Okay, so we're back for a special edition of News from the Roots. I have some special guests on. Let me see, there's Carla Mendoza and Marianne Martinez and Joan Parks. And we're here because last night there was a demonstration on campus at WCU to protest the end of the DACA program because of the decree of President Trump. And we're here to talk about the impact of that on people who live here. And this is a terrible thing that's happening to people right now. People who, if not born in this country, came as very young children and through no fault of their own were brought to this country. Their parents were undocumented immigrants, and some of these people are in college now, own homes, own businesses in some cases, and all of a sudden are told that they could be deported to a country that you don't know at all. You've never lived there, as I understand it, and the conditions in those countries, in some cases, are very dangerous. Tell us about your experience. Let's start with you, Carla. I heard you speak last night very movingly.
Thank you.
Tell us about your experience in this country and what's going on now in your heart and your mind.
So Tuesday was a very, very rough day, just getting the news that the DACA program will be terminated. I myself am undocumented recipient. The program was started in 2012, and I believe in undocumented in this country is not fun. We'll put it that way. I was brought to this country when I was 8 months old by my parents. I was born in Mexico, and I was brought to this country at 8 months. I was raised here in the States, in South Carolina is where I grew up most of my life. And it's been very difficult. Out of my whole family, my parents and myself are undocumented, and we do have family members that are citizens of this country. And they do worry about myself and my parents, like what can happen to us. We want to keep the family together, and we don't want us to be separated. I don't think any family wants to be separated or torn apart because of those conditions that I actually didn't know I was undocumented until I was reaching that age in high school that a lot of my peers were either applying to colleges or they were starting to get their driver's license, and I was trying to do the same thing as they were, but there were certain questions that were asked, and unfortunately I didn't have those answers. Asking about Social Security and do you have a visa, and questions like that started popping up, and that's when
in school, you mean your teachers were asking you this? Or?
Teachers and also applications for college.
I see.
So I did a lot of phone calls to schools and asking, I really want to go to school, but is there another possibility for me to apply to the school even though I don't have a Social Security number? And most of the time tell me, well, go ahead and start your process with immigration. And once that's done, give us a call back. It was very tiring hearing that time and again. Fortunately, I was able to attend college being undocumented. It was at a private institution that opened their doors. They welcomed us. If you meet our requirements, if you have good grades, and you have that desire to pursue a higher education, you are more than welcome.
And that was in the university system of North Carolina?
That was at Johnson C. Smith University, where I completed my bachelor's in biology and chemistry.
Where is that in South Carolina?
That is in Charlotte, North
Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina. So,
okay.
Because of, I can't remember too well the legislative measure that was passed in South Carolina. If you do not have a social security number, you were not. So I picked up and Johnson C. Smith opened up their doors to a lot of students like myself because I am not the only one in these situations. There's 800,000 of us DACA recipients, but beyond that, there's 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country. We're here to fight for better opportunities, for higher education. That's why my parents brought us to this country. Because we are fleeing from poverty, from social situations that are not dangerous situations, where we are being persecuted.
How did you afford to go to college in this country?
Unfortunately, even though we do receive a work permit and we do receive a social security number, that social security number is only allowed to be used for work purposes. And I am ineligible to qualify for grants or for scholarships or even for FAFSA. Those aids I am unqualified to receive. So all throughout my college career, my parents were working very hard for me to attend college. I myself worked 2 jobs also while trying to get my college education. And it's very tough seeing that your parents are working day and night, 7 days a week, in order for you to reach that dream. Because that dream is not just my own, it's also my parents' dream. So
Marianne, you have a similar story?
I'm here as a support system for Carla. Carla works with the CNO's Farm Worker Health Program. I'm the executive director over there. Of course, Carla, we're lucky enough to have her on our staff. We have several patients that also have DACA, and several stories that are similar to Carla's.
So are you a student?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate you thinking I am. No, I'm the director over at Vecino's Farm Worker Health Program.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with Vecino's?
I've heard of it, but tell me about it.
Okay, sure, yeah. So we provide primary health care to agricultural workers in western North Carolina. We serve all 8 counties. We're active in about 5 or 6 of them, just depending on where the farm workers are at that time of the year. We have between 750 and 800 patients, and we provide everything that you would receive at your primary care provider. So as well as several other programs, but everything from referrals to general checkups, and we do case management. Some of our programs include a food bank program. 5 out of 9 farm workers identify as having not enough food throughout the year. So one of our objectives is to make sure that our farm workers stay both healthy enough to bring us our fruits and vegetables throughout the year, as well as being having enough nutrition to do that as well. So we've got our food bank program. We have a women's social group that helps women get out of the house, get to know one another. They learn about health topics, everything from acid reflux to diabetes to healthy cooking. We have several programs. I could tell you about all of them, but
Where's your office? Where do you operate out of?
Western Carolina University donates an office to us.
Okay.
We're in the new Health and Human Sciences building.
And so do people have to come there to be treated or to receive medical care, or do you have doctors and nurses that go out into the community? Yeah,
that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So one of the barriers to healthcare, especially within the farm worker population, is transportation and language barriers as well, because 94% of farm workers in North Carolina speak Spanish, 10% of which speak an indigenous language and only some Spanish, but we don't have anybody that speaks indigenous. So we focus on Spanish. Our flagship kind of service is a mobile clinic, and we have a 15-passenger van that's been completely decked out with everything you would find in your primary care provider's office. Everything from an exam table to medicines.
X-ray?
We don't have X-rays. Not yet. And we go around to the different camps that we've identified over the past 16 years of our operation. We have a doctor that's full-time on staff. We have 3-4 RNs that work with us on a contract basis. We have 4 outreach staff right now.
What a wonderful service.
Every night, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, we go to a different place. We coordinate with the farm workers to make sure they're home. We arrive when they're home. We provide the services that they need. On Wednesday night, we have a clinic on Western's campus that Harris Hospital has been kind enough to let us use, along with Western, on Wednesday evenings, people make appointments and come in to see the doctor. We see more of our seasonal patients that work in the area. Maybe just after their regular job, they go and pick tomatoes, or they work only in the summer, and then every other time of the year they work in other landscaping or housekeeping or something like that. So our clinic is for people that don't live with necessarily a lot of other farm workers. They can come in as they need. In our mobile unit, we go out to the people that really face those transportation barriers.
Joan, how do you plug into this?
Well, I'm a member of the Indivisible group here in Western North Carolina. Started in Silva, and it basically started with a group of people that were concerned after this most recent election as to what's going on. And I also went to the Women's March, and through that we had a focus group, and that was called Common Ground. And then we kind of merged those two because people were going to both groups. So we've identified different areas that are concerns. We've got environmental group and education group that are kind of spearheaded the immigration area, but different areas that we're focusing on. And with the immigration, I know how much a lot of these people contribute to our community. I'm concerned that they're being discriminated against, and I'd like to help educate the community, get the word out so people know that they're here, see what they've done, and help in any way that we can.
So, it's my understanding, and please correct me at any point, but that a lot of immigrants, undocumented immigrants, come into this country because they are lured into this country by jobs and industry, particularly in the agricultural industry, because there's a shortage of Americans who will do that work for the wages that they pay. And so there's that economic lure, and I, as I understand it, I mean, there are direct methods of luring specific immigrants from specific countries to come to the United States to fulfill this need for the agricultural industry and other industries. And so, like, the industries themselves are very complicit in creating this problem of undocumented immigrants in this country. And yet, now it's kind of, there's this ignorance about that aspect of the issue, that the purpose that undocumented immigrants play in our economy. And now it's suddenly been turned on its head, and immigrants are being blamed for so many taking jobs of Americans, which is simply not true, and for being a drain on the economy. But it's the exact opposite, actually. And if this were to be fulfilled, Trump's promises, and all the undocumented immigrants were forced to leave this country, I think that there would be a tremendous negative economic impact on our economy. Can you describe, have your parents talked to you about reasons they came to America? And
all the time.
Tell us about their reasons, their story a little bit, if you will, and how they came into this country. And do you have brothers and sisters? I mean, tell us about your family a little bit.
So this is something that my parents speak to myself and to my brother. So we're a family of four. I'm the oldest, and my brother is the youngest. I'm older by 3 years. But this is something that our parents remind us of constantly, that they came to this country because the opportunities to find work in Mexico are very tough, and if they are able to find work, it is very, very local. Very little. Both of my parents come from very small rural towns in Mexico, where the ability to find work is very sparse. And if they do find it, it's not very well paid. And they tell us all the time that the reason that we brought you here to this country is that you have more opportunities that back home we know you're not able to have, and for you to pursue a higher education, because we don't want you out in the field working. We don't want you working out in the sun, because we want something better for you. We want you to be able to work in an office, to be doing what you love, and not going to work every day tired because you worked really late the day before. You have to wake up at 5 in the morning and go out to the field and pick vegetables. We don't want that. We want something better. We want you to have more opportunities and to pursue higher education, because my father, unfortunately at a young age, lost his father, and he had to step up in the family. He was not able to finish school. On graduation day from from university, I won't forget the words that he said, because it was an accomplishment that was very big for me. I'm a first-generation college student and the first person in the family to hold a college degree. And I'm very proud of you, because you have done something that I couldn't do. Because your dreams are mine too. And I know that you will go very far, because you have more opportunities here than you would ever have. That is the reason that they have come here, to provide better opportunities. We're not here to steal. We're not here to take jobs away from people. Because what we have come here to do is to take those jobs that a lot of people do not want. I want to say that out of the whole patient population that we serve, we have maybe a couple of Caucasian workers, but the majority are Hispanic. We take those jobs to support our families, to build a better future for them.
I'm not sure about how sensitive this is, and you don't have to answer it if it's a problem. But how did your parents come here? By what method of transportation did they walk across the Rio Grande? Did they, what was their trip like coming here?
So I was very young when we made that trip. As I said, I was 8 months old, so I cannot remember much of it. But I do remember just from, of course, conversations that we have as a family, that they did walk across the desert. They did walk here.
And how many children?
It was just myself at the time.
Oh, at that point.
Yes.
And
My brother is actually a U.S. citizen, and he was actually
born here.
He was born here.
And he's your only sibling?
He is my only sibling. But I do remember just walking across the desert. It was very hot. My mother was actually deciding on not taking the trip because I was so young. And she was worried that along the way that something could happen to myself, because it's just so hot in the desert. And at nights, the temperature can drop just like that and can get very cold. And she was just worried about my well-being taking that journey here. But fortunately, we made it here. And
and again, I'm terribly naive about this. Tell me why undocumented immigrants more undocumented immigrants don't try to come across legally as immigrants. What's the process like for a Mexican family who wants to come here legally?
The process can be very long, and I have been told, if you're here, do the things the right way. Get in line. Apply for citizenship. Unfortunately, that line does not exist for us. If it were to exist, I would have been in that line a long time ago, and we are trying to do things right. Our immigration system is flawed. The process to get visas or to apply for citizenship can be very long, and a lot of those applications are being denied. There is a lottery of visas that the United States does have, but because it is in such a high demand, it causes the wait times for a lot of these families. Right now I know that for petitions for siblings. So if my brother were to petition for myself to become a citizen, right now they're working on cases from 1994.
Oh my gosh. So we're talking about a 20-year process, which
Exactly.
is a lifetime
Exactly.
for people.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, in that wait time that application is being processed, the person is not granted any protection. They could still be deported at any time, even though their application is pending. They're still out in the open.
But and that's for people who have family in the United States already. What about people who are in Mexico and don't have family here?
That process can also take some time. I'm not as familiar with that
Mhm.
process growing up here, but that process can also take some time. And I think Marion can maybe talk a little bit more about that also.
Well, let's talk about some of the barriers to even coming here in the
Yeah.
first place. So a lot of people in Central America and Mexico that want to come here are persecuted. They're persecuted politically. They have gangs knocking at their door every day. If they're lucky enough to be a small business owner, they probably have to pay a large portion of their income.
That's here in the United States.
No. This is in Central America or Mexico.
Oh, okay.
So they're persecuted politically, especially if they're indigenous. Whether that's outright persecution or kind of under the table, they're ignored in their mountain communities. They have little to no resources. So for them to even decide to come here is a lifetime savings and a lot of debts to a lot of different people. Especially if they're coming from Central America, they have to cross through Central America, through Mexico, and then pay somebody to lead them through the desert, hoping that that person won't leave them.
Honest, yeah.
Yeah, to perish in the desert, basically. So we're talking already about thousands of dollars to get here, even without papers. The transportation, the language barriers. So all of these factors go into deciding, is somebody going to come here, regardless of whether it's legal or not, is somebody going to come here to begin with? They're leaving their family knowing they probably will never see them again. So to even apply for papers, for some visas, you have to have up to $20,000 in the bank so that the government of the country that you're applying from will even consider you. It's very subjective. I could walk in there like this, just dressed, in regular office clothes, and they might give me a visa, possibly, if the person kind of feels like it that day. Or I could walk in with ripped jeans and a ripped t-shirt and apply. Same person, same amount of money in the bank, same life experience, and they might deny me. So it's very subjective. Not to mention the amount of money it takes to apply for a visa. And then the wait time after that. And then after that...
How much money is that?
It would depend on what kind of visa that you're applying for and what country you're applying from. But let's just say hundreds of dollars. And then let's talk about also... So the one person I know in Mexico, he works, I'd say maybe between 10 and 11 hours a day. He's a chef. And he works Monday through Saturday. The restaurant's closed on Sunday. He earns $35 a week. $35 a week for 10 to 11 hours of work a day. And the cost of living in Mexico, people say, oh, the cost of living is different. It really isn't that different from here in America. They just do things differently. So rather than spending the money on the nice car, they spend money on food for that day. This young man does not have a water heater in his house. He doesn't have running water in his house. They order water every day to be brought in and installed in a huge tank on top of their house that then runs down. So these kind of things are where these people are coming from. So if you earn $35 a week for, what would that be, 60 hours of work, how are you going to afford even the clothes to go and apply for a visa? So these are all the barriers that you just have to think about whenever you're thinking, oh, well, they should come here legally. There's no way for them to even start that process because they're so disadvantaged economically in order to begin it. And then we can also go into the implications of why these countries are so economically disadvantaged. And I would put my foot out there maybe a little bit and say that the United States has a large hand in having made that happen. Trade agreements over the past however many years, especially since the 90s and NAFTA, the devaluation of the Mexican peso in the 80s, And then on top of that, NAFTA just bottomed out the Mexican economy, for one. And so people are moving from rural settings into urban settings because they no longer can support themselves on the corn and the other vegetables and fruits that they've been growing out and then selling to other places, because now this trade agreement has had such a huge impact. So now they're all moving into the urban setting. They're flooding all of the markets for work. There's no work. Now they've lost all their home. They're living in makeshift homes. And this is, 20 years ago that this happened? And not much has changed since then. So there's all of these historical implications that come into somebody saying, come here legally, that you have to understand there's a lot of backstory to this, and there's a lot of barriers that most people don't see because they're here and they're privileged enough not to have to see it.
So it sounds, it's basically most of the undocumented immigrants are economic refugees, you might say, because the people who are living in the middle class, such as it is in Mexico, they don't need to come to America, and if they do, it would be easier for them because they have the economic means to do so. But it's the people who are suffering economically, basically, who come here. And so your family was among those. So what did they do? So they walked across the desert, and where did they go? And where did they live once they got out of the desert? And how did they begin to establish themselves economically?
It was very rough the first couple of years. I know that I come from a farm worker family background. So when we arrived to this country, we were lucky enough to have some family that was already here and that were able to give us a little bit of support, helping us find a job as soon as we got here, helping my parents get a job as soon as they got here. So initially, we arrived in California, and there's a lot of places that they could go to work in agriculture, and we started working in agriculture the first couple of years that we were here.
And that provided a place to live as
and
well,
that provided a place.
such as it was. Yeah.
Not of the best conditions.
Right.
I know from just talking to my parents that the first year we didn't have a car because we were still trying to make ends meet and trying to get food on the table and have playing rent. So we got to Idaho and we worked in potatoes, and then from there we moved to California, where that was where I spent most of part of my childhood, and I remember a lot of actually going out into the fields with him where they picked apricots, and my brother was born by that time, and usually I was the one taking care of my brother while my parents were working out in the fields. And when we made that transition from Idaho to California, the living situation was difficult. For the first couple months we were there, we stayed with another family members of my father.
And how old were you when you first came?
I was 8 months old.
8 months?
8 months old. And I was around 5 or 6 when I was out in the fields with my parents, taking care of my brother. My brother was roughly around like 2 or 3 years old. Of course, finding a babysitter and being able to pay for a babysitter on top of that was difficult for my parents. So sometimes what they would just do instead is take us to work and either sit us in a tree under the shade and we had to stay put and just help them either just play around with other kids that were there while they were working in the field. But when we made that transition in California, since we're still trying to get a foot on the situation that we were in, there was a total of probably about 10 people living in the trailer. And there came a point that unfortunately the family they had another child, and we had to sleep out in the car.
And just to be clear, the trailer, was this owned by the family, or was this owned by the farmer and rented, or
this was rented out, and it was in town, so it wasn't on the farmer's property, but it was rented by our family, and they allowed us to stay there while we were able to find another place to stay, and we were able to stay inside for a couple months, but after that, I was getting bigger and more chapter.
slept in the car.
We slept in the car.
4 of you. Okay, so at this point you had a car. But
It was an old van that they had.
An old van, okay.
An old van. So we slept in there until finally we were able to find another small trailer.
For how long did you stay?
I want to say about maybe 2 or
3 months. Okay. And then you found another place
and
to
we
rent.
found a trailer right there in that same trailer park that we were able to move into and find a small.
Just your family.
Just my family.
So that was a step up.
That was a step up for us.
Yes.
That was definitely a step up for us, and it may not seem big to maybe other people, but for us it was a huge step. Finally being able to call a place of our own and have space for just the 4 of us. It was a 1-bedroom trailer, but it was ours.
And so you were in California for how long?
I was in California up until the age of 6, actually.
So a year, about?
About a year.
About a
or
year.
So, yeah, a year and a half or so. And then we moved to South Carolina.
Why? Why'd you move to South Carolina?
The reason we moved to South Carolina is we had family on my mother's side of the family, and the plan was just to go and visit. But once we got there, the area was a lot calmer compared to California because we were staying about 40 minutes out from Sacramento. So it was a town called Fairfield. Around that time, it was like around the 90s, and I feel like a big factor for my parents at the time were deciding to stay in South Carolina. There was a lot of gang violence around in our neighborhood, and they didn't want us to grow up around that. So we visited South Carolina, and we stayed in South Carolina. They weren't seeing that in South Carolina, and they wanted us to grow up in a safer environment and growing up around gang violence.
And so initially you stayed with relatives?
With relatives also, and for us, that transition was a lot quicker than when we had first initially arrived in California, because we were able to also find better jobs. So my parents, by this time that they were in South Carolina, they actually transitioned from agriculture, and my father started working in construction that pays somewhat a little bit better than farm work, and my mother started doing some housekeeping work also. Because my brother was younger and she was trying to be at home to take care of him. My brother was older now. We were both in school, and she had that opportunity to maybe not work full time, but just work some part time work as a housekeeper and also just contribute into the family.
So your family did what immigrants have always done traditionally in this country. Basically, they started out with nothing.
Exactly.
And just worked their way up the ladder. I mean, as far as they are today, wherever they are, But they were able to establish themselves economically and contribute toward the community, pay taxes, I'm sure.
Definitely, and that's also a common misconception that a lot of people have, that as undocumented immigrants here in this country, and also DACA recipients, that we don't pay taxes, that we're just taking money out of the government or federally funded programs, which we're not eligible to receive benefits from those kind of programs.
Not food stamps?
Not food stamps, unless the child is a citizen. If that child is a
so
citizen.
your
My
brother,
he was able to qualify, but my family never applied for those benefits.
So basically, you had to pay federal taxes. Did you have to pay Social Security taxes?
Yes.
But you would never. Your parents will never see the benefit of that.
No.
So that's like, what, 12.5% of their income went towards something that they would not benefit from.
Yes.
Medicare, another some percentage. Yeah.
Even though undocumented immigrants do not have a Social Security number, the IRS designate an ET number, so a tax identification number for immigrants, that they are able to use that identification number to do their taxes. So, and now with DACA recipients, with that Social Security number that was granted to them from the government, we're able to file taxes. Even though we were doing it before under the ET number, we have a Social Security number that we can also pay taxes. So we are paying taxes to this country.
Well, and just to add on to that, everybody pays taxes.
Yes.
whether they choose to file their tax return or not. You pay sales tax, you pay gas tax, you pay your income tax because it's taken out automatically from your paycheck. The employers are responsible for that. So regardless of whether somebody chooses to file their tax returns or not, they still pay taxes without ever reaping those benefits.
So there's this great mythology, again, about immigrants being a drain on the economy. It's the exact opposite, in fact. And we have a president who is so ignorant, or willfully ignorant, or malicious. I mean, just he knows it, but he doesn't care. He's using immigrants as a scapegoat, in a sense, not in a sense, in actuality. And that is a story that's as old as the ages. I mean, my family, I'm Jewish, and they experienced the same thing. My relatives, my grandparents experienced the same thing in Nazi Germany, and where, incidentally, Hitler and Mussolini, they targeted immigrants as well as Jews and Catholics and anybody who was not, Aryan race or whatever. And we think that couldn't happen in the United States of America, but it's happened.
Well, and just to bring it a little bit closer to home, so you talk about the federal level, and it's kind of this weird cloud that exists, and that state over there doesn't, it's kind of, like you to use your word, mythological, kind of those states over there. But to bring it home to North Carolina, I think Carla and Joan had pulled together some statistics about North Carolina DACA recipients that are quite impressive.
Yeah. The information that I found on DACA was that $1.2 billion in tax revenue comes from DACA recipients. So there's
state and federal, or
that's federal.
Federal.
But 95% of the DACA recipients are currently working or in school. 63% were able to get a better paying job because they had the DACA designation. 54% bought their first car. 12% bought their first home. They're working in better conditions now. 46% of eligible immigrants have received DACA. So it's made a huge impact. But it's also very expensive for them to do that. They've got to jump through lots of hoops. It's like $500 every 2 years for them to even apply for DACA. And, there's all the regulations that go with that. They can't have any criminal record. They have to be here before the age of 18 or 16, somewhere in there. So there's, they're well vetted by the government. And obviously they're working hard. A lot of the DACA recipients are doing more white-collar jobs. Whereas the people on the HB, whatever they're
H2A.
Yeah,
Visa.
They're coming in, to do the farm work and those kind of things. So it's kind of a different area that they're covering. But we're all immigrants.
But it's such a betrayal, because when President Obama instituted this program, a lot of people came out of the shadows and put their names down on a piece of paper so that they could now be tracked by government officials. And now this is rescinded, then it's like the rug was pulled right out from under you, and you're exposed. And not only you, but I suppose your parents and
most of us have either addresses of home, which happens to be our parents' address, and if it were the case that the information is decided to be used against us, we'll go to our homes and our parents will more likely be there also.
Which is why it's important for people to know their rights, that they don't have to open the door, that they don't have to answer questions, that they don't have to respond to people knocking on their door. If somebody comes in with a warrant, yes, but that's a whole different kind of story. So it's important that people that are undocumented, or even if they do have DACA, that they realize that just because somebody comes knocking on their door, they don't have to open their home's door to those people. It's important that they know those rights. Mm-hmm. Well, and we're talking a lot about farm workers, I guess, because we were with Vecinos. And I wanted to go back to something you had said earlier about the H-2A program and just kind of bring in the point that the United States has always imported its labor. Who started this country? I mean, who did we import on huge boats from the other side of the world to come and work in our fields? It was the slaves. So we've always imported our labor, especially agricultural labor. We didn't even have immigration laws until the Chinese Exclusion Act of, 1880, I want to say? And so now all of a sudden we're all worried, 100 years later, that's not very long in the history of most countries, about all of these implications of having begun our country by importing labor. And now, as we continue to do that, out of one side of our mouth, we're saying, yes, come here so we can exploit you and pay you $50 for the 2 tons of sweet potatoes that you've just picked. And then on the other side, we're saying, no, don't come here because you're illegal. After the emancipation and slavery was outlawed and all that kind of thing, sharecroppers, of course, became kind of the primary provider of agricultural means, agricultural labor. And then when the World War started, we started the Bracero program. And that was our first official visa program to bring in workers from Mexico specifically. When people came home from the war, that program was stopped. But that had brought so many people into the United States. They had brought their families. They had established their lives here. So you're talking about an entire generation of young, healthy, working Mexican men that have come back to the country, which, mind you, the United States kind of stole from Mexico back in the day. And they are now expected to just up and leave, even though they were asked to come here. They extended that program to the H-2A program. H-2B focuses on landscaping. I think it covers construction as well.
H-2B also covers just other
All other
business, other areas of work.
So now we have the H-2A program, which in Western North Carolina we have about 400 or so H-2A workers that come here every year that we serve as Vecinos. So that's kind of a little bit of history about that immigration process. Not to mention all the people that have come here without papers because they've been persecuted or pushed out economically, or they've just always, you've got these push-pull factors. They've always dreamed of going to the United States. It's kind of this golden land of opportunity. And they know that if they come here and they bring their 8-month-old baby, she could end up on the television talking about how she received a bachelor's and is about to be accepted into medical school. So that's a little bit more of the background of the immigration history.
Well, another aspect of the immigration history is the total hypocrisy of the fact that everybody in this country is an immigrant. I mean,
except for our neighbors.
The Pilgrims did not have immigration papers either when they came here, and talked to the Cherokee about immigrants to this country, and something you touched on. Another thing is that a lot of the western part of this country used to belong to Mexico. I mean, before the Mexican War. So an interesting fact that I learned recently was that the reason the Mexican War was fought, or one important reason the Mexican War, and the reason that Texas seceded from Mexico is because Mexico had outlawed slavery. There were cotton plantation owners in Texas that wanted to keep their slaves, and that's the reason they seceded from Mexico, and Texas became an independent state. It was about slavery. And so then Texas became part of the United States to prevent Mexico from taking Texas back. And then the United States acquired the Mexican cession, I guess, which was more or less stolen from Mexico at that and the Mexican cession was what? New Mexico, Arizona, California, up to Oregon, I guess. A huge swath of the western part of this country. And so for now us to treat Mexican immigrants so shabbily is unimaginable. It's important that we look that history be told and understood. It's really not. I never learned that in public school.
Same thing for the Cherokee. None of that was taught
Right.
in school. I mean, they might mention the Trail of Tears, but they don't talk about all the other
Right.
things they've done.
Well, and going to details about the Trail of Tears and what a horrible episode in history that was.
Well, and despite all of their receipt of our bad blood against them, I just love, and I have to mention this, that during the hurricane, how, and Mexico has its own problems, will not glorify their government, but that they sent they sent their troops to come and help Texas after the hurricane.
Yeah.
And they're knocking on the border door saying, hello, we're here, and nobody would let them in, even though they're offering food and help and rescue squads. And
Which are terribly needed. I mean, I have some relatives in Houston, Texas, that were stranded. They almost died, as I understand it. I haven't been able to talk to them. I text with them, but their home was flooded, and there's somebody on a kayak that rescued them. But there's a shortage of help in right now, and certainly the help from Mexico. So, your parents, does your father own his own business now, basically? Or?
Right, he does not. He still works for another company. He doesn't do construction anymore, but he does do maintenance work on equestrian communities. The town that we live in, South Carolina, they do a lot of shows and horse competitions and polo and a lot of the big revenue in the town that we live in. And my mother right now, she actually does her own self-employed, but she still continues to help.
And they own their own home?
Actually, they are paying their own home. They have bought their own home.
They're paying a mortgage. I wonder what that was like, getting a loan as an undocumented immigrant.
It was actually financed through the owner, and we did not get a loan.
Oh, I see. Oh, through the owner, I see.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it has to be done.
We're still paying for that.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us? What can we do to fight this?
Well, from what I'm finding, there's 14 states that have a lawsuit against President Trump for discriminatory animus. So hopefully that will help some. 17% of the DACA people have advanced degrees. 27,000 in North Carolina, we're the 7th highest state, have DACA recipients. 21% of them are in education or in health services, which is, those classifies there. So just have to keep trying to educate people and let them know what's going on.
Well, so you said how many states have joined this?
14 was what I heard.
14 states. Are they mostly in the Northeast or?
I think they're North Carolina's included in that. I'm not sure.
So the North Carolina state government has joined that?
Yeah.
Oh, because Josh Stein is the Attorney General, probably.
And what I heard on TV last night was that they were very optimistic since they'd already been successful against his Muslim ban twice. So we shall see how that goes.
How is our state government reacting to this? Not just the executive branch, but the legislative branch. Have they taken any action? Have there been any statements made?
I've heard that Tom Tillis has some kind of proposal out there, but I'm not sure.
Well, he's federal now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know about as far as the state.
I'm wondering, you said that our state has already joined that lawsuit. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any, in those states, within those states, have any actions been taken to protect DACA recipients?
I'm not sure. I'm not aware of
I'm not
that.
sure.
Well, I guess that's one thing we can
Yeah.
work toward, is maybe introduce some measures that are being taken in other states to protect DACA recipients.
Yeah, our march last night we had a good turnout. It was well attended. There were a lot of people there that were asking for more information, and I think we need to get the community more advised as to what this is and
In
make
fact, I
people
was there
aware.
with a video camera last night, and we'll be showing that mini documentary, right after we speak. We'll put that on the air.
Great.
We'll show that repeatedly. That was a good turnout. I was a little worried. It was getting close to 7:30, and I didn't see anybody there. And then all of a sudden, people came out of the woodwork, and it was good to
Great.
see. Yeah, the NAACP was involved in that, as well as other groups. What's the name of the organization? Is there an organization specifically that's working for DACA recipients on campus?
I don't know if there's this DACA, but LASA is the Latino Appreciation.
Student organization.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
LASO, LASO.
Is there a way that people can get in touch?
I think they have a Facebook page.
Yeah, I believe they do have a Facebook page that they can reach
Okay.
out to and ask questions about. But definitely just keeping the community educated on what's going on. If they have questions, like, don't be afraid to ask a DACA recipient or an immigrant about, ask them about their stories, why they're fighting for this, and just help them support, make calls, apply pressure to senators and representatives. Because there are some proposals that are being put out there to provide like a permanent solution for DACA recipients like myself. Because we do want to adjust our status and just continue contributing to this country that we call home. So stay educated, and I'm not sure, John, I think there is another action that will be taking place.
Hopefully we'll be able to do some more events to get the word out there and let people know what's going on.
So Trump has used the rationale. He's saying that what Obama did was he stepped outside of his executive powers to create DACA, and what he's doing now is putting it in the lap of Congress to create, in his terms, a real solution. So I guess what we need to do is make sure that Congress does that.
Yeah. I'm very grateful that Obama at least got the ball rolling. He got it out there
Yes.
so that we can at least address it and people will become
There's a
aware
foundation
of
for
it.
it.
Otherwise, it would have just been kicking the can on down the road forever with no changes.
No resolution.
Because they've tried over the years to
Sure.
pass something and nothing's ever happened. So at least this gets things
That's true.
out
At least there's
front.
the outline of a program that could be adopted
Yes.
or adapted by.
And that seems to be the only way we can
Congress.
get government to do things.
Yes.
We wouldn't have health care today if it wasn't that it hadn't been pushed so much
Right.
by the Obama administration to get things going. And now it's like they're really having a hard time going back to the old system. So
Yeah.
these things, we're making a little bit of progress, and even though now it seems like the most horrific things that can happen, at least people are being informed. And hopefully we can make the changes that we need for our country.
Amen. Amen.
Because this is, we're all living the dream, and we don't know how fortunate a lot of us are until we hear stories like these. We don't know how other people get up in the morning and live until you hear their story. And we've got to be talking. We've got to talk to people. We've got to understand where they're coming from, and hopefully they can understand where
And
we're
write
coming
to our
from.
legislators,
Yeah.
You may think that it's worthless to write to Mark Meadows, but if we don't, he can say, well, nobody wrote me. It's not
Yeah.
a very important issue, So make sure that you do. Write
Yeah.
to Mark Meadows.
Right,
Write to
call,
Tillis.
text.
right
Tweet
to.
anything you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little overwhelming when you think about all of the issues that are happening, and there's just so much. And sometimes I want to just be an ostrich and stick my head in the ground and never come back out and hope that one day it'll all go away. But I really, truly challenge all of the viewers today to do at least 3 things. Number 1 would be to call somebody. You can Google call 5 people. It will work you through the 5 people that are your representatives, senators, legislators, who to call. It gives you a script, depending on which of the certain topics that you'd like to address, and DACA is one of them. The first challenge is to call somebody, call someone. The second challenge is to donate, whether that's money or your time. Vecino's Farm Worker Health Program would be so happy to receive donations.
Is there a phone number, an email address, an address to write to?
Sure, yeah. Well, our website is Vecinos, vecinos.org, and our information is on there. Our email address is on there. If you're looking for somewhere to volunteer, we accept English speakers, we accept Spanish speakers, we accept bilingual. We accept Farsi speakers. It doesn't matter to us. We will take you and use you if you're willing to donate your time. We'd love to have you. Or if you're not able to, donations in monetary value are so significant. $25 can provide 2 families with food boxes for weeks. And so those kinds of donations go so much farther than you think that they would. $25 fills up my gas tank, but that can give a family food for a week. So kind of putting that into perspective, your small donations are really so impactful. And then the third challenge that I would send out to our viewers today is that they learn something new, whether that's about immigration history, whether that's about DACA, whether that's about the bills being proposed around immigration, or if you're not interested in immigration, learn about the health center funding cliff that would take away 70% of all health centers' funds from if we don't have funding by the end of October. So educate yourself, because there's so many topics, and I don't mean about everything. Just choose one thing, learn one thing today, and tomorrow learn another thing, and the next day another. And continue to have those critical conversations, because it's hard when you're talking to somebody and they just don't get it. But the more they hear it, and the more stories they hear, and the more different perspectives that people that are not quite ready to hear it yet, the more likely they are to hear it the next time that somebody talks to them. So those would be my 3 challenges, is call somebody, volunteer, donate, and learn something new.
Thank you all for being here this morning. Come back, please, as we continue in this struggle, and keep us updated. Well,
I'd also like to invite anybody that would like to join Indivisible Common Ground, Western North Carolina. We meet at St. David's the first Wednesday of each month at 6:30, and any and all people are welcome. We are nonpartisan. We are interested in trying to forward our community and our nation. Please feel free to come join us.
please do, and please also remember that Mountain Stream TV is here and is serving the purpose of getting the word out for this cause and many others, progressive causes. This is about the grassroots, and yes, it takes support from the community. We need people to help with financially. We need people to help with running the studio. We need people to provide content for our television station. This is your television station. and so please do support us all. And thank you again for coming, and we'll see you next time, I hope.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.